Good evening, everybody. Welcome to class number 8, the class which was originally supposed to be the last class of the Lays of Beleriand, but is now the penultimate class of the Lays of Beleriand. Welcome. We are going to get through the end of the original poem today. It's going to be good. And actually, not only are we going to get to the end of the part of the poem that Tolkien wrote, it is my plan to go further than that and get to the end of the poem that Tolkien didn't write tonight. So that's exactly, just to spell out precisely how ambitious I'm planning to be in tonight's class. That's indeed my plan. So, okay, quick announcements. First, classes have started this week. Classes are off to an awesome start. We've been, the first sessions of the classes have all happened. It has been so awesome. So the Star Wars class last night, John Garth Tolkien's Wars class the night before. I was watching Mike Drout's first Anglo-Saxon video. It's been great. We got a wonderful turnout for all of our classes this term. It's just a really awesome group of people. Really, really great classes. There's still time. Enrollment for the classes is still open through the second week. I mean, of course, as of now, if you haven't signed up yet, you're missing them. But it's still plenty of time to get caught up. But just wanted to sort of remind you, in case you'd been forgetting, that's on the way. Cool. Yeah, Karita was saying she saw us on the Star Wars class. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Dr. Sturgis is the bomb. Second, quick announcement. This, do not forget, is our next book. And if you haven't read this book yet, don't forget that it's very thick. So you might want to get started in advance reading this book. I'm planning to take 1 week off after the Lays of Beleriand class. So this is going to go through the 2nd of September. Then we'll take 1 week off. And then we'll go through the end of I don't even know how long it's going to take, but we'll start Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Tom, I'm thinking right now. I mean, I've not finished the details planning it out, so I might change my mind about this. But I'm thinking 9 sessions for this. If you want to get started on the first class reading, I'm thinking chapters 1 through 8. Of part 1 that takes us up through, I believe, through page 115. So the first 115 pages of the book. Anyway, yeah, I'm still reading it. I've never read this book before, as I've been telling everybody. This is the first book that's been elected in the Mythgard Academy series that I've never read at all, and I've been excited to read this for a little while. So I'm still reading it. I'm almost halfway through now. So I still got plenty of reading to do, but as I say, I've been really enjoying it. But I'm thinking like 9 weeks, a little over 100 pages a week, something like that. That's my back of the envelope so far. Once I finish, I'll make final decisions depending on how I want to break things up. But that's kind of my estimate here. So we'll start middle of September, go through Thanksgiving essentially. Yeah. So anyway, so that's where we are. So yeah, where am I exactly, Tom? I just got up through. Jonathan Strange just came home to England after being in the Napoleonic Wars, section I particularly enjoyed actually, with Lord Wellington. So that's where. And Sarah, yeah, no, you're right, Sarah. We do need to talk about the BBC series. I did mean to do that, so I'm gonna have to add a session or two at the end there, probably 2 sessions. Yeah, you're right, Sarah. Thanksgiving's a forlorn hope. It really is. So, anyway, we'll see. Well, I said I promise. My goal is to have the schedule published and ready for you by next week, so you can have the. But I just want to give you a little advance notice, so that in case you're wanting to get started early, just to remind you to start reading and to let you know where we're going to go for the first week. So. That was my second announcement. Third, don't forget that Friday on this week we have the second episode of Silmarillion, I almost said the Silmarillion Seminar, Silmarillion Film Project Season 1. Last time we planned out the plot. That was so much fun. I don't know if you've been listening to the Silmarillion Film Project series, but it's been so much fun. And in the last episode, we were planning out the overall plot arc of Season 1, which is going to go from the Ainulindale through the Awakening of the Elves. So really through that first war and the chaining of Melkor. So it's going to be entirely focused on the Valar, and in particular in the episode, my favorite part was really doing a lot of thinking about the character of Melkor. What's really going to be kind of making him tick? What do we see? What does Melkor desire? How does he see himself? What is his relationship like with the Valar? Anyway, it was really cool, and actually, I hope to be coming back to that by the end of class tonight. Anyway, that'll be. So this week we're going to follow that up, and we're going to be talking specifically about the frame narrative, especially thinking about where. So we're going to follow up with some of the suggestions that some of the listeners have had, and then we're going to go ahead and think about the frame narrative, which we're focusing on its being probably almost certainly young Aragorn. So we'll talk about that on Friday, and then immediately afterwards, I'm doing my Twitch stream. You can watch the adventures of young Grifflet as he goes through and meets Radagast the Brown, and we'll look at some of the particular kinds of adventures that Radagast sends Grifflet on. Actually, that whole sequence is a favorite of mine in Lotro, and this particular story that they're adapting there, I think it's pretty cool. So that will be happening on both of those things will be happening on Friday. Silmarillion Film Project at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and my Lotro stream at 12:30 p.m. All right. Without any further ado, let us get right into the Lays of Beleriand, as we have a lot to cover, and a diminishing amount of time in which to do it. So I want to focus, and remember, the overall emphasis tonight, the sort of the major theme I want to be looking at, as I've been talking about, is release from bondage. As I've said before, I find that title, sort of subtitle, I guess, perhaps, really a title, of this poem to be just extremely evocative, and I want to be looking at various different ways in which that idea comes up. Once you start thinking about that and looking at that, you just find it everywhere in this poem. So I want to be looking at what is the overall trend, what is really sort of the story behind this, in what senses is the story of Beren and Luthien, the story of release from bondage. Now, I want to start with, we were in Thu's Tower, and we were spending a lot of time with the, for which I still shall not apologize, spending a lot of time in the song battle between Thu and Felagund. We're, of course, going to be beginning with the aftermath of that and looking at Luthien's rescue of Beren from the dungeons of Thu. And I want to start with the scene. Hang on a second. I want to start with the scene where, not where Luthien actually releases Beren, but when she comes up and sort of calls out to him, and he hears her, and he hears her, and he sings back. That moment, of course, is something I've talked in a couple of different contexts in several different podcasts about the fascinating parallels that I see between this moment and the moment, for instance, with Maedhros and Fingon, right when Maedhros is his wrist is stapled to the mountainside on Thangarodrim, and Fingon sings from down below, and then Maedhros sings in response, and thus is Maedhros discovered when Fingon can't find him. And of course, the obvious parallel between that and the scene with Frodo and Sam in the Return of the King, when Sam is also in despair, being unable to find Frodo, and he sings and hears Frodo singing in response, and that's how Frodo's hiding place is revealed. The parallel between, of course, Frodo and Sam and Fingon and Maedhros is extremely close, even to the fact that it's up higher than you can climb by any path, right? Sam needs a ladder to get up to the trapdoor in the ceiling where Frodo is. Fingon has to scale up the side of the cliff to get to where Maedhros is. So those are obviously very, very parallel moments. But both of them, both Frodo and Sam and Maedhros and Fingon, also echo this moment. And I'm especially interested in this particular depiction of this moment. This is my favorite version of this moment by far. The full version of this that we get in the Way of Luthien. Because here we see Tolkien doing something different. We see Tolkien doing something different with this whole sing and response by the prisoner motif, and I want to look at that. So as I read this, two questions I want to come back to at the end of the passage. First, what is her song exactly? We were looking some about magic and song and how that seems to work last time. What song is she singing? What is her song doing? Okay, and then secondly, his song. What is his song, and what is his song doing? Okay, those are the things I want to come back to after we read the passage. So, okay. The silences were sudden shivered to silver fragments. Faint there quivered a voice in song that walls of rock, enchanted hill and bar and lock, and powers of darkness pierced with light. He felt about him the soft night of many stars, and in the air were rustlings and a perfume rare. The nightingales were in the trees, slim fingers flute and viol seize beneath the moon, and one more fair than all there be or ever were upon a lonely knoll of stone in shimmering raiment danced alone. Then in his dream it seemed he sang, and loud and fierce his chanting rang, old songs of battle in the north, of breathless deeds, of marching forth to dare uncounted odds and break great powers, towers and strong walls shake, and over all the silver fire that once men named the burning briar, the 7 stars that Varda set about the north were burning yet, a light in darkness, hope and woe, the emblem vast of Morgoth's foe. Okay, first, her song. What's her song? Good, yeah, Kate, Tom, Karita, Yana, yeah, she seems to be singing of the moment when he first saw her. Yeah, there does seem to be a recreation of them. Once more, we see Beren seeing Luthien from afar, right? Seeing Thuringwethil from afar, dancing upon the knoll. In shimmering raiment, right? The music, the soft night air, right? He is taken back in that moment. Notice how her song pierces the walls, the hill, and of course the bars and locks, right? We get the release from bondage motif worked in immediately, right there. So in the middle of this darkness, remember Beren is near despair, right? He's sitting there in the dungeon with the body of Felagund, right, who's just died, and he has this vision of their first meeting. And Josiah, that's a really good way to describe it. Josiah says that her song transports Beren back to that place and to that time in his mind. That does seem to be the case. What's his song? Her song is simpler in the sense that we're getting, the whole description of her song is a description of the one scene, right? It's associated with light, right? From the even the imagery of the silences were sudden shivered to silver fragments through, the powers of darkness are pierced with light. And then he feels about him the air. So again, the whole experience, whole sensual experience of being there in that other place at that other time is sort of brought back to him. But his song in response is more complicated in the sense that it has more parts, right? His song is loud and fierce. Old songs of battle in the north, of breathless deeds, of marching forth to dare uncounted odds and break great powers. So wait, old songs of battle in the north? Which battles in the north? specifically is he singing about? I mean, just like generally northern battle. What? What are our options here? Well, not the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. That's not happened yet, right? Josiah the Dagor Bragalach is the one that came right before, right? That's certainly the most recent battle in the north. That's the one in which his father Barahir saved Felagund's life, for instance, right? That's the one where kind of his homeland was kind of wrecked, and how he and his dad and their friends ended up as outlaws. It could be that. I mean, again, it's sort of the war in the north with the most personal relevance to Beren, right? And Beren's own sort of family history and experience. But look what it says about it. Okay, so what about the battles in the north? Breathless deeds of marching forth to dare uncounted odds. Okay, all right. And break great powers, and towers and strong walls shake. Really? I mean, okay, that's not how the Dagor Bragalach went, right? I mean, maybe this is like an alternative history of the Dagor Bragalach. What would have happened if they won? But it wasn't an offensive battle; it was a defensive battle. Morgoth attacked them, right? They were besieging Angband, and then boom, the leaguer of Angband got broken when Morgoth came out with the flames, and then that all seems to be here in the earlier stories. Back in the Book of Lost Tales, we didn't have the Dagor Bragalach yet. That concept certainly does seem to be here now. So yeah, this doesn't sound like it. This is an offensive battle, marching forth to dare uncounted odds and break great powers, and towers and strong walls shake. And then we get a hint, right? And over all the silver fire that once men named the burning briar, and the 7 stars that Varda said about the north were burning yet, a light in darkness, hope and woe, the emblem vast of Morgoth's foe. What are we talking about? What are we referring to? The sickle of the Valar, yeah. The Big Dipper, exactly, Tom. Yeah, this is a slightly more heroic way of describing that particular constellation than the Big Dipper. But yeah, it's the sickle of the Valar. I do think that this goes back to the chaining of Melkor. I think the war, the battle in the north that's being alluded to is the battle of the Valar against Melkor. That was an offensive battle. That was the moment when there were breathless deeds of marching forth to dare uncounted odds and break great powers, and towers and strong walls shake. At the very least, it's the memory of that. Right? Sure, you can say, like, okay, maybe the Valar themselves in person coming in might to Utumno. It's a little hard to describe, like a battle that has, like, Tulkas and Orome and, Eonwe and everybody all on one side, and Morgoth and his lackeys on the other side, as daring uncounted odds. I think if Tulkas is on your side, your odds are pretty good, actually. But nevertheless, I do think that the parallel is still there. He speaks of doing what the Valar did, in a sense, that is marching to the north and shaking strong walls and towers and breaking great powers, and then of course we have the sort of the central emblem, the burning briar, the 7 stars, the sickle of the Valar, the emblem vast of Morgoth's foe. So the Valar came and did this before. The Valar, the sign of the Valar, the emblem of the Valar, still hangs in the sky above Angband. So, I mean, I don't think he's like recalling well, okay, no, I do think he's recalling that battle with the Valar, but he's not singing the song of that battle. Again, notice his song is different, fundamentally different from Luthien's, right? She is recalling the night when he saw her. He is singing a song ultimately really about the future, right? I mean, daring uncounted odds and shaking strong walls, and that's what he's gonna do, right? If he continues his quest and goes to Angband, he'll be daring uncounted odds, right? But it's a song of victory that he's singing. It's a triumphant song that he's singing, and sort of paralleling the conquest of the Valar, right? He's going to be going where the Valar went, and under the sign of the Valar, by extension, perhaps with the Valar's backing and by the grace of the Valar. How are these two songs connected? Or, to say this another way, in what sense is his song an answer or a response to hers, rather than a non sequitur, right? Arthur was sort of joking about the fact that there seems, to be perhaps a little bit of gender stereotype going on here, that like the two of them sing, right? She sings about their relationship and the night they first met, right? And he sings about marching forth to battle, right? Kind of masculine and feminine there. Yes, kind of hard to get around that completely. But of course, I do think there's more to it than there. Carita says she encourages and he responds with courage. Yes. Good. More. How do these two things go together? Yeah, Luthien is looking back and he's looking forward. Yana, I agree. Tom, you're right that Beren's song is a kind of a prophecy, right? It's not just a prediction. It's not just saying, I'm going to win, we're going to win, Morgoth shall be overcome. But it's more a song of courage. Remember, again, I'm thinking back to Sam's song in the Tower of Cirith Ungol now. Remember, the narrator of The Return of the King tells us that Sam's song had been defiance rather than hope. And I can't help but think that same description applies to Beren's song here, that this is a song of defiance and not of hope. So why is that? Of course, it is a direct response to the two of them. Kate, what a wonderful observation, Kate. Kate Neville says, notice how the first song is Luthien's light, right? Light comes in, the light pierces the dark, the light of Luthien pierces the darkness, and in the vision that her song creates, we have her dancing, shimmering in the light, right? In shimmering raiment, danced alone. And then his song ends with this light of the stars, right? The light of the stars of the Valar, the emblem vast of Morgoth's foe, right? So those two things are sort of connected, or sort of one sort of leads to the other. It's at least certainly an interesting parallel there. He is in despair. What she provides him is not necessarily hope, though I think we can see some hope in those 5 lines emphasizing the 7 stars, the burning briar, the emblem vast of Morgoth's foe. They are not alone, and Morgoth does have enemies who kicked his butt before and can probably do it again. There's hope going on there, I think. But fundamentally, Beren's song is a song of defiance. He is moved from despair to defiance, and what's the link? The link is her song, right? That image of her dancing on the knoll, this is what he's fighting for, right? It's been a long time since he left Doriath, and a reason he doesn't even know what so the fact that it's not just that he's reminded, oh yeah, Luthien, right? He hasn't forgotten about her, right? But hearing her and getting that direct reconnection to their relationship, to the reason why he is doing this, I agree, Karita, even in more general terms, and Kate, coming back to the point that you were making, her singing about beauty and peace and music and goodness, all those things sort of associated with their relationship and with that night for him. And of course, not to mention, here's another parallel, Kate. It's not just the light thing, right? That particular moment of their relationship, of him seeing her from afar, and she, the shimmering, shining, semi-divine one, showing grace to him, right? Turning to the man alone in the darkness, alone and weary and hopeless in the darkness, and turning to him and showing him pity and love instead of disdain, instead of him suffering the loss that seems, okay, yeah, there are uncounted odds against his succeeding in his quest for the Silmaril, but you know what? The odds against him succeeding in, getting Luthien to put her hand in his were pretty darn uncounted too. So that, I think, is another really sort of interesting parallel. Tom thinks that his song is actually one of hope rather than defiance. Yeah, maybe, Tom. Tom says, Sam saw that the shadow was a passing thing and ultimately didn't matter. Yes. Above all shadows rides the sun and stars forever dwell. I will not say the day is done nor bid the stars farewell. That's the culmination of Sam's song, right? So yeah, his song is about putting things into perspective. Yes, though here at journey's end I lie in darkness buried deep, beyond all towers strong and high, beyond all mountains steep, beyond all shadows rides the sun and stars forever dwell. So yeah, things are bad right now. So this is why it's not a song of hope, because he's like, things are really bad right now, and whatever, I might die, things might not work out. I'm not saying things are going to be pretty, but what I won't do is say farewell to the daytime, because I know that above and beyond all these things, the sun is still riding and the stars are still out. There is, beauty, high beauty that the shadow can't touch, as he vocalizes to himself more explicitly when he sees the star later on. But you're right, Tom. That's not exactly what Beren is saying, and the difference is the burning briar, right? The difference is the sign of the Valar. Sam's is a more sort of general thought, as you said, the shadow is a passing thing. Beren's song specifically recalls the might of the Valar, the fact that they have come and taken care of Morgoth before, and the one thing that leads me to say that it's okay. Well, there are two things I guess I would say, Tom, to the idea that Beren's song is a song of hope. I still don't necessarily, that is, see more hope in Beren for the success of his enterprise necessarily than Sam had. Though I mean, maybe the breaking great powers and towers and strong walls shaking and all that stuff. It's possible that he's sort of investing his own confidence in the grace of the Valar, maybe. But the other thing again is that he's not. But you're right. But you're right that he knows a little bit more clearly than Sam did, perhaps. It's not just about there's light up beyond the shadow, but he knows who the Valar are and what they've done before and what they're likely to do again. Kate says that she kind of agrees with Tom more because the fact that Luthien, beyond all reasonable hope, chose to return his love, this would be a ray of hope that pierces his despair. Quite possibly. Kimber says a lot more hope in the endeavor if he takes this Luthien along with him. Yeah, Kimber will get to the... Beren's kind of slow to adopt that particular strategy, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about here in a couple minutes. But first, we can't skip over Luthien's defiance of Thu, because, I mean, seriously. Nigh the foul spirit Morgoth made, and bred of evil, shuddering strayed from its dark house, when Luthien rose and shivering looked upon his throes. So here is I almost called him Wolf Sauron, Wolf Thu, right, with his throat clasped in the jaws of Huan. Huan has beaten him, right, and Huan is about to destroy the wolf body in which he is invested, and Luthien comes out and delivers her awesome speech. O demon dark, O phantom vile, of foulness wrought, of lies and guile, here shalt thou die, thy spirit roam, quaking back to thy master's home, his scorn and fury to endure. Thee he will in the bowels immure of groaning earth, and in a hole everlastingly thy naked soul shall wail and gibber. This shall be, unless the keys thou render me of thy black fortress, and the spell that bindeth stone to stone thou tell, and speak the words of opening. With gasping breath and shuddering he spake, and yielded as he must, and vanquished betrayed his master's trust. Okay, of course you can see from my subtitle here that I can't help but think about Éowyn and the Witch King when I get to this moment. And if you can help but think of Éowyn and the Witch King, how do you help that? I don't understand. Notice, but there's sort of a fun parallel. Her defiance of Thu. Now, Luthien is in a slightly more advantageous position to be making this speech than Éowyn was, right? Éowyn is facing the Lord of the Nazgul in rather an uneven battle situation, right? Whereas Luthien is saying to this when he is actually held clamped in the jaws of Huan, Hound of Valinor. So yeah, Kate Neville says Huan is slightly better, support team than Mary is. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's certainly fair. Yeah, Tom, you're right. The odds were pretty uncounted against Éowyn in that particular moment. Agreed. The sort of the defiance sounds like Éowyn, but what's really fascinating to me is the actual threat that she makes, the consequences that she spells out will happen to him if he does not submit, actually sound like what the Witch King says to Éowyn. You notice that, right? Or your flesh, you shall be taken away to the houses of lamentation beyond all darkness, where your flesh shall be devoured and your soul shall be left naked before the lidless eye. That idea of everlastingly thy naked soul shall wail and gibber. It's actually kind of. I think it's sort of interesting. Yes, Yana, I know Mary got the Witch King's knee, but I mean, seriously, which would you rather have? Would you rather have a hobbit stabbing somebody in the back of the knee, or would you rather have the Hound of Valinor with its jaws around your opponent's throat? I mean, come on, seriously, there's really no comparison here. But anyway, yeah, so Josiah thinks it's derivative, right? Sauron remembered this and taught it to the Witch King later on. Anyway, yeah. So, but I think that reversal is really kind of interesting. But anyway, forgetting the Éowyn parallel for a minute because it's not my entire point. A couple points that we can notice here. What is the nature exactly of Luthien's threat here? What's she doing? What's she doing here? She wants him to give her the key, right? The opening spell, the words of opening to the tower, and more, the spell that bindeth stone to stone, right? So there's this opening spell that she insists on him giving her, or else they will kill him. Here shalt thou die. What's going to happen after that is the consequences of his death. That to his spirit will roam quaking back to thy master's home, his scorn and fury to endure. And here's probably what Morgoth is going to do to you if that happens. Why doesn't she kill him? Why doesn't she kill him? Or, I mean, let Huan kill him, right? Does she need the opening spell? Maybe. Certainly the most efficient way to get to Beren, as it turns out. Here's where I kind of come back to the interesting parallel between what she says to Thu and what the Witch King says to Eowyn, right? When the Witch King makes his threat to Eowyn, right, how she shall be borne away to the houses of lamentation beyond all darkness and all that stuff, he's indulging himself, right? I mean, yeah, he's trying to scare her, but she's already scared, right? He is indulging himself in sort of describing and thinking about how she will be tortured, right? This is the horrible thing that's going to happen to you. I do not believe that Luthien is enjoying that, right? I don't think she's gloating over Thu. It's not purely gloating. It might be like a little bit of gloat, but I don't think it's just 100% gloat here, right? That she's like, oh yeah, here's what's going to happen to you, right? Because notice, there's a condition, right? She's saying, here's the dreadful thing that's going to come upon you unless you do this other thing, in which case it won't, right? The Witch King is just like, here's what's going to happen to you, right? Now, I know the Witch King's threat is technically conditional, right? Come not between the Nazgul in his pray, or he will not slay thee in thy turn, but he will bear thee away to the house of lamentation, right? So he's saying, I will do this to you if you come in between me and my prey, right? With the implicit condition that if she doesn't, if she stands aside and lets him come in and, like, you know, either take Theoden or dismember Theoden's body or whatever it was exactly the Witch King was planning to do to Theoden, if she stands aside, he won't do that. He will just slay her in her turn, probably, right? Rather than bearing her away to the houses of lamentation beyond all darkness. So that's nice, right? If you can trust him. But it's very different from what Luthien is doing, right? Luthien says, here's the path you're on, my friend, right? You're about to die. Huan has you in his jaws, and frankly, if we do nothing, you'll probably bleed out. So this is the path you're on, right? But there's an alternative for you, right? And all that needs to happen in order for you to choose that alternative is to give me the opening spell, to speak the words of opening. And he takes that. That is to say, there is the whole sort of the structure of Luthien's threat is ultimately one of pity. That is, she's trying to get something from him, but she's making a positive offer to him, not a threat, right? She's not threatening him. She's spelling out what is in the middle of happening, right? Let us be clear upon the situation, about the situation here, Mr. Thu, sir, right? And he betrays his master's trust, and is released, right? She releases him, of course, from Huan's jaws, releases him from death, releases him from the, he has been preemptively released from the bondage that she predicted, right? Morgoth was going to immure him in the bowels of groaning earth, right? And his naked soul is going to wail and gibber everlastingly in a hole, by her prediction, right? Seems a plausible prediction, right? That was the bondage. So it was eternal bondage in torment, Morgoth's torment, that she predicted for him, and she released him from that if he gave her the words of opening. Sarah King says, of course, if Morgoth ever finds him, he's still going straight to the hole in the earth. Maybe so. But anyway, again, to me, it's fascinating that we can see even here her emphasis, even with Thu himself, is on release, right? That he too is being released from the bondage that's due to come to him. Let's look at her using the opening spell. No, Arthur Thu never went back to Morgoth, as far as we know. Now, I mean, he never. There's like the business in Numenor, right, where he does get them to start worshiping Morgoth. So it's not like he is completely setting up as a free agent entirely. But no, we have in the Silmarillion, Sauron never comes into the story again. After he flees in vampire form to Tower Nafuin, he doesn't come back until the Second Age. So that's all we know in the published Silmarillion. But no, I don't recall any other references. Anyway, yeah. Let's look at the opening spell. Lo, by the bridge a gleam of light like stars descended from the night to burn and tremble here below. There wide her arms did Luthien throw, and called aloud with voice as clear as still at whiles may mortal hear long elvish trumpets o'er the hill echo when all the world is still. The dawn peered over mountains wan, their grey heads silent looked thereon, the hill trembled, the citadel crumbled, and its towers fell, the rocks yawned and the bridge broke, and Sirion spumed in sudden smoke. Like ghosts the owls were flying seen, hooting in the dawn, and bats unclean went skimming dark through the cold airs, shrieking thinly to find new lairs in deadly nightshades' branches dread. The wolves whimpering and yammering fled like dusky shadows. Out there creep pale forms and ragged as from sleep, crawling and shielding blinded eyes, the captives in fear and in surprise from dolour long and clinging night, beyond all hope set free to light. A vampire shape with pinions vast, screeching leaped from the ground and passed, its dark blood dripping on the trees, and Huan neath him lifeless sees a wolvish corpse, for Thu had flown to Tower Nafuin, a new throne and darker stronghold there to build. Okay. What do you notice? What do you notice here? First, let's focus, going back a second, let's focus on Luthien's actual spell. Now, first of all, it's always really tempting to read this as just like Luthien's power, her might, her song is so awesome that she just sings a song and wham! It just blasts the tower down. That's like a little bit true, but it's not the whole story, of course. She was given by Thu this spell that bound stone on stone, so she is unbinding stone to stone, and boom, the tower falls over. So it's not just a pure exertion of her power overcoming it. But anyway, yeah, so we get... it's, again, not just her might, but notice that, the imagery, I was really struck with, as you can tell, again, from my subtitle, by the dawn imagery. Lo, by the bridge, a gleam of light like stars descended from the night. The dawn is peering over the mountains Huan as this comes in, right? So as the sun rises, the song and light of Luthien comes in. I think it's really cool. I think the dawn is going to play an important role in this scene. When we get here in the Film Project, we'll have the sort of the sun coming over the horizon on one side and Luthien walking across the bridge and singing her song, and she'll be shining, and it will be like hard to tell whether it's light that's reflecting from her raiment from the sun or whether she herself is shining as she sings, and between the two lights the tower crumbles. It's kind of awesome. Anyway, yeah, Kate, I agree. This song is more like Beren's song of battle, with the trumpets echoing and the towers collapsing. But Tom, you made a wonderful point about her song. Tom says, in her voice is the sound of the horns of Elfland. Absolutely. Did you notice that? Tom, that really struck me too when I was reading through this passage. Where's the bit again? Called aloud with voice as clear as still at whiles may mortal hear. Right? So notice, you might almost expect that the narrator of the speaker of the poem would say, the song she sang then was one so powerful that no song yet, since has been like it, right? That's kind of the direction you might expect it to go. To sort of, her song was so superlatively like it's incomparable, but that's almost the opposite of where he goes, right? Instead, the speaker says, she sang a song, and you can still hear a song like it, right? There's totally precedent for this. In fact, it was quite like the song that at whiles may mortal hear long elvish trumpets o'er the hill echo when all the world is still. So yeah, when you hear the sound, the horns of Elfland, Tom, exactly as you say, that's like what her song is. I think that's enormously important here. Remember her song to him before. She sang him a song of Beren the mortal coming and seeing the fairy princess dancing in the woods, and his not daring to approach her, but then daring, and her turning and putting her hand in his. Now her song sounds like the elvish trumpets o'er the hill echoing when all the world is still. Like that elfish song that a mortal might just be able to hear. Yeah, except this time it's coming towards him, right? Beren, the mortal, in this case, is in prison. And instead of hearing it faintly o'er the hill when all the world is still, right? It's like that song, but it's walking across the bridge to him, right? It is coming to seek him and to find him, rather than being this elusive thing that no mortal can touch. Again, it's almost the opposite of that, and that is so cool. Kate, isn't that cool? Kate says it's a nice twist for Luthien the nightingale, Thuringwethil the nightingale, to be bringing daylight back. It's super cool. Okay, good. Notice, of course, what happens when Luthien knocks the tower down. Of course, prisoners are set free, right? We've got everybody released from bondage going on all over the place, right? And it's almost like a side effect, right? She comes to rescue Beren and to free him, and when she does, just freedom, release from chains all over the place. But notice, it's not just the pale forms ragged as from sleep, crawling and shielding blinded eyes. It's also the wolves whimpering and yammering, right? Remember the description of the werewolves before. Remember those descriptions where it sounded like the wolves themselves were being tortured, that that these demon spirits were sort of invading and possessing the evil creatures of Thu, were sort of twisted and tortured by his magic and his will. Those whimpering wolves, they may just be evil wolves that are terrified right now. Between Luthien and the sunlight and the breaking of the tower and Huan over there, they've got reason. There's plenty of reasons for whimpering and yammering to go around, but they were slaves too. And I'm wondering if the wolves themselves are being released, are being set free. Again, remember, we even had a similar kind of implication about Thu himself. Now, the final reference, of course, this, of course, the necromancer flies off to Mirkwood, right? See you in the Hobbit, Mr. Necromancer. That's why in chapter 1 of the Hobbit, I'd say there's a necromancer who is in a tower that's the darker stronghold that he built over there in Tower Nafuin, and that's where Bilbo should go, nowhere near that thing, right, on his trip. They don't want to go down to southern Mirkwood. I'm not saying that Mirkwood and Tower Nafuin are geographically the same thing, that it's exactly the same world, but it's very clear. And you remember the descriptions that we were looking at for Tower Nafuin, for that forest, for Deadly Nightshade, in the Children of Hurin poem, and how similar that sounded to the descriptions of Mirkwood. However, he's redoing the maps and sort of taking out bits. It's clear that he's recycling that bit, and that Mirkwood in the Hobbit is obviously very directly drawn from Tower Nafuin, and the fact that there is a tower with the necromancer living in it is really a direct borrowing from this poem. In fact, when the necromancer is referred to in chapter 1 in the very first draft, the very first fragmentary draft that we have that Tolkien wrote of The Hobbit, chapter 1, there's even a reference to Beren and Luthien, that the necromancer has been there in southern Mirkwood ever since he had that little run-in with Beren and Luthien. And yes, he is, when he, in a vampire shape with pinions vast, a vampire shape means not Count Dracula, but a bat. Vampire bats were just called vampires. This is, of course, post-Dracula, so, that's already, Dracula is already, Bram Stoker's Dracula is already a major hit, but it's still, in general, I think there's really no question that he means a vampire bat. Okay, so the passages we've been looking at here so far, we're getting a pretty clear release from bondage thing, right? A pretty clear trend of the setting free of prisoners. We've seen it being tied, thematically to these ideas of hope and despair, right? Hope, despair, defiance, all that stuff that we were looking at. So there certainly seems to be a correlation there. Let's move now to the part, Kim, this is the part that you were, Kimball, this is the part you were referring to before, about Beren's desire to leave Luthien behind. Okay, and I want to look at this because I think it's a really important thing for us to understand where this poem is going, sort of what's at stake in this poem, especially what's at stake in this poem compared to the Tale of Tinuvio. Okay. Beren has just been like, okay, we'll drop you off soon, right? Pretty soon we're going to part, and this is Luthien's response. Why part we here? What dost thou say just at the dawn of brighter day? Right? We just did the dawning thing, right? This was our reunion, clearly a good thing, right? We got a good thing going on here. What's the plan here, Beren? For safe thou art come to borderlands, o'er which in the keeping of the hands of Melian thou wilt walk at ease, and find thy home in well-loved trees. Duh. Right? There's Beren's response, right? What do you mean, why are we parting here? Obviously, we're at the edges of Doriath. You'll be safe here, right? It's the girdle of Melian. She's your mom. You'll be fine, right? So go find thy home in well-loved trees, because I want you to be safe, and I'm going off into darkness, right? Okay. Karita, I know it does seem kind of ironic, and many people, of course, I believe, to be struck by this irony that he's obviously in a bit more danger than she is, right? She just came in and laid waste to the not just rescued him from the tower where he was imprisoned, but laid waste to the tower in which he was imprisoned, right? So you would think that it would have been borne home to him that if anyone needs protecting, it's him and not her. True, yes, that's certainly there. But I think there's more to it than Beren just kind of sort of trying to salvage his ego or being ignorant of her comparative strength. Look at her response here. My heart is glad when the fair trees, far off uprising grey at seas of Doriath and violet. Yet Doriath my heart did hate, and Doriath my feet forsook, my home, my kin. I would not look on grass nor leaf there evermore without thee by me. Dark the shore of Isgalduin, the deep and strong. Why there alone, forsaking song by endless waters rolling past, must I then hopeless sit at last, and gaze at waters pitiless in heartache and in loneliness. The issue here, I would like to sort of divert attention away from relative assessments of their strength, or assessments of their relative strength, right? Or of the practical advantages of keeping her along with him, right? I think the most important issue in this whole sequence, in the him trying to leave her behind and her really insisting that she's not going to be left behind, I think the whole important thing in this scene is the question of mortality, right? He is saying, I'm going to die. It's not just I'm going to die. It's not merely that the odds are incredibly good, I am going to be killed. I am going to death. Like, that place is death. Angmar, not Angmar, Angband, similar but different. Angband is associated in the early mythology with hell itself. That is like way, way back in the Book of Lost Tales day. Tolkien talked about Angband as the place literally where bad people went after they died. Okay? It was literally hell. The holding place for the wicked souls of the dead. He abandoned that idea. I don't know for sure why. If I had to guess, and it's a 100% guess, my guess would be that he didn't want Morgoth as a rebel to be playing a part in the... The modern view of Christian hell, especially modern view of like medieval depictions of Christian hell, even medieval depictions of the Christian hell, usually focus on like demons as torturers, right? So you've got the damned souls under the torment of demons. So you've got the demons, just like the modern idea of like, you go down to hell and you meet Satan, and he looks like Satan, like, in Gary Larson's Far Side cartoons, right? Satan welcomes you at the door of hell and he's like, come into my place and everything. That's not how it works at all. That's not how it works at all. Hell is the place of torment of Satan and his angels, and also the damned souls, right? That is, they're not the cheerful custodians of hell. They are the chief of the incarcerated prisoners of hell. So that's a complete misunderstanding. In other words, Tolkien's original conception was more like the modern misunderstanding, even the medieval misunderstanding at times, of hell. Where, again, Morgoth was like in charge of damned souls, like as if this were his job and how the whole system was supposed to work. My guess is that that's why he abandoned this, that he didn't want that to... he was uncomfortable with sort of the way that worked out. It's hard to make Morgoth into, like the rebel who is in defiance of the order and the system that Iluvatar is imposing on things, if in fact he's playing this crucial role, like I'm the guy who's the custodian of hell. So anyway, that's so he has abandoned that. But yet, nevertheless, we can still see the word hell being used, at least metaphorically, of Angband many times later on. And we'll look at that in a minute. Some of these sort of specific examples that we can still see of that very clearly in this poem. Beren believes he is going to death. Okay? Perhaps into death, with a capital D, when he goes to Angband. He does not want to bring Luthien with him into death. Right? So he says, not only am I probably going to die, I am going into death. You stay here. I want you to be safe. Right? Stay with your mom. Your mom will keep you safe. I don't want you to go into death with me. I do not want you to die. I am willing to die. If I must die for your sake, it's okay, but I don't want you to die too. Right? Notice the important element, I think, here in her response. She says two things, right? The first half of her response to him is, let's not forget that I left Doriath on purpose, and I knew what I was doing when I did it, right? So why would you think that I would just want to go, that going back there is going to be like awesome for me, right? My heart did hate Doriath. My feet forsook it. She admits, I like Doriath, right? It's nice to see Doriath from a distance. My heart is glad when I see it, but I don't want to go there. I left it on purpose and I want to stay away. So the first thing she does is assert her will. Remember, I made the choice. But the second thing, and this is the thing that I really want to emphasize here, because I think it's easy to focus on. Yeah, Brian, Mom has a nice treehouse waiting for you. Exactly. It's easy to focus on the first part, which is a very important part, right? Her saying, no, I have chosen. You can't choose for me. I chose. And I continue to choose you instead of Doriath, right? That is very important. But I think it's also very important to see the second part of the statement. Dark the shore of Isgalduin, the deep and strong. Why there alone, forsaking song, by endless waters rolling past, must I then hopeless sit at last, and gaze at waters pitiless, in heartache and in loneliness. You see what she's spelling out for him? What's she trying to explain to like Captain Mortality over there? Right? You're an elf, daughter of Melian and of Thingol the king. You should go back to your elfish realm and be safe. Yeah, Nancy, immortality can get real lonely, right? It does sound like hell, doesn't it, Tom? She spells out for him, okay, Beren, let's imagine I do go back and live my immortal life back in Doriath while you go off and die. Okay? What's that going to be like? It's going to be like, it's not just about the treehouse. Of course, there's still that treehouse issue. But it's not just about the treehouse. The bondage in which she will be locked if she returns to Doriath is far greater, because her choice and her love are still set upon him. If she returns to her immortal life in her wood, it will be locked into an immortality of heartache and loneliness. Thinking of Esgalduin, the river that runs in front of the gates of Menegroth, thinking of the waters of Esgalduin being endless waters rolling past, that image, that image of the river, which seems to me to be sort of a metaphor of time, right? Time will be like the waters of Esgalduin rolling past endlessly, just this endless continuation of years in which I sit hopelessly gazing at the pitiless waters in heartache and in loneliness. So, Beren, does this actually sound like an upgrade? Right? Yes, exactly, Timothy, the burden of everlasting life. The alternative, that he believes he's immortal, right? He's like, there's life and there's death, right? So choose life. Life would be better, right? Maybe you could be, I'd rather have you safe than dead. And she's like, really? I'm not sure I would, actually. Right? Being locked there in Doriath without you, and again, an immortal life of heartache and loneliness, that's not a good alternative, right? Jumping backwards for a second. Remember Felagund's final words? Here's Felagund's final words to Beren in the darkness. Then a voice he heard, farewell. On earth I need no longer dwell, friend and comrade, Beren bold. My heart is burst, my limbs are cold. Here all my power I have spent to break my bonds, and dreadful rent of poisoned teeth is in my breast. I now must go to my long rest, neath Timbrenting in timeless halls, where drink the gods, where the light falls upon the shining sea. Thus died the king, as elvish singers yet do sing. The two things that I would emphasize is the alternatives that he sees. On the one hand, of course, like there's no downplaying the sacrifice of Felagund, and yet, on earth I need no longer dwell, friend and comrade. Right? My heart is burst, my limbs are cold. I don't need to stay here anymore. Now I can go, and where's he going to go? He's going to go to his long rest neath Timbrenting in timeless halls where drink the gods, where the light falls upon the shining sea. That's not so bad, right? There is, even for Felagund, who is not, watching endless waters, pitiless, in heartache and in loneliness, even with him there's an element of relief to be finally going to his long rest neath Timbrenting in timeless halls, right? He's broken his chains. Literal chains, right? But in a sense also that, the chains that are keeping him here on earth and away from Timbrenting in the timeless halls where drink the gods, right? He's going to go back and be reunited with Dad, right? So, not so awful that, right? But again, so there's this question of release. Which would he rather? So again, Beren, death, not the worst case scenario, right? Not the worst case scenario. Certainly not the worst case scenario for an elf. So in this way, one thing that I think that we can see here is again, Beren thinking like a mortal, as I said. Beren not actually understanding what's at stake, not thinking through what's at stake for Luthien, the elf girl. In this, we're facing certain death, we are marching into the land of the dead kind of situation that he finds himself in. Here's Luthien, when he does leave her, right, and then Luthien catches up with him again. This is that speech. So he's just sung his really nice poem about her, which we'll come back to. But then she comes from a distance and is like, look, I've tried to explain this. So she explains it again. Ah, Beren, Beren, came a sound. Almost too late have I thee found. O proud and fearless hand and heart, not yet farewell, not yet we part. Thus do those of elven race. Not thus do those of elven race forsake the love that they embrace. A love is mine, as great a power as thine, to shake the gate and tower of death, with challenge weak and frail that yet endures, and will not fail nor yield, unvanquished were it hurled beneath the fountains of the world. Beneath the foundations of the world. My reading is awful tonight. Let's pause for a second. You see what we got? You see the reference that she just made in that sentence? A love is mine, as great a power as thine, to shake the gate and tower of death, with challenge weak and frail that yet endures, and will not fail nor yield, unvanquished were it hurled beneath the foundations of the world. Let's try to unpack that. It's a complicated sentence. She has a love and a power as great as his. Her love is as great as his. In what sense is it as great? It is as great a power to shake the gate and tower of death, with challenge weak and frail that yet endures. Okay. We following this? Yeah, Sarah, doesn't that sound like a reference to the song that he sang? That shaking the gate and tower sounds exactly like that, right? And yes, Nancy, you're right. So far, her record at tower shaking is a little superior to his. Totally agreed. But she's not going there, right? Luthien does not come up and be like, Beren, you idiot, right? I think you'll need me. That's not the point, right? Notice how she is characterizing what he is doing, right? He is, through his love gives him a power to shake the gate and tower of death. Wow. So like she's depicting him as like he's going to come like in his dream, like in his song, right? He's going to come and he's going to conquer and take down death. Well, no, she does recognize that the challenge that he's delivering is weak and frail. Okay, that doesn't sound so confident, but there is still power in it, because although it's weak and frail, it endures, and it doesn't fail or yield, even if it's hurled beneath the foundations of the world. It might get chucked away, right? The challenge might be lost, but yet it will not fail nor yield. And if it is hurled beneath the foundations of the world, it will be hurled there unvanquished. That's the strength. That's the power that his love gives him, right? He's going to go, and yeah, he might die. He's probably going to die, right? There's really like uncounted odds that he's going to die. But nevertheless, it's a challenge, though weak and frail, it's a challenge that yet endures and will not fail nor yield. And so she says, she recognizes that in him and says, a love is mine, as great a power as thine. I'm with you in this, right? And no, she's not saying, your challenge is really weak and frail. I think I can up your odds. That's not what she says. Her emphasis is not, you have a better chance with me. She says, I too have the strength to offer a weak and frail a challenge which may be as weak and frail, and yet will also endure and not fail nor yield, right? We are in the same position. But now look, beloved fool, escape to seek from such pursuit, in might so weak to trust not, thinking it well to save from love thy loved, who welcomes grave and torment sooner than in guard of kind intent to languish, barred, wingless, and helpless him to aid, for whose support her love was made. Okay, all right, hang on a second. Let's Let's go back in. Syntax complicated in this passage, right? Beloved fool. So he's acting foolishly, right? Even though she says it with affection, right? He's a beloved fool, right? Beloved fool. He is a beloved fool, escape to seek from such pursuit. That is her pursuit, the pursuit of her love, the love that is hers, and all that. Foolish to try to escape from her. In might so weak to trust not, thinking it well to save from love thy loved. You think it's a good idea to save, through your love, because of your love, to save your beloved, right? But your beloved welcomes grave and torment. I would rather be tortured and die sooner. That's preferable to me than to be in guard, than to languish in guard of kind intent. To be barred, wingless, helpless him to aid, for whose support her love was made. Right? My love was made for you, she says at the end. Right? Remember that great doom that lies upon them? She says this, it's not just that I happen to love you, right? I was made to love you. This is my doom as well, and I have chosen it. And I will not be. It is not more kind. You are a beloved fool if you think that to use your love to try to protect your beloved, me, from sorrow. You don't understand. I would welcome grave and torment sooner. And again, there's that image of her by the river, right? In heartache and in loneliness, stretching out through centuries and millennia. No, grave and torment, sign me up for that. That's better. Way preferable than the other. Brian Dimmick asks, does beneath the foundations of the world refer to being imprisoned in Angband? I don't know. I'm not sure if that's exactly what she's alluding to there. I mean, it sounds like hyperbole, an exaggeration, right? Poetic exaggeration. I don't know if it's an exaggeration of like what their fate in Angband would be like, or whether it's referring to death itself. I'm not sure. But again, her overall point here is, Beren, you're not releasing me from bondage. You're trying to put me in bondage. That's not going to happen, right? She tries to convince him. He is not setting her free. Go back to Doriath. You're free. You are putting me in prison, right? If you want to release me from bondage, bring me with you. Let me die with you. That would be release from bondage. Well, then the Hound weighs in on this question. Here's Huan's point of view. This is him speaking to Beren, of course. Of one fair gem thou must be thief, Morgoth's or Thingol's, loath or leaf. Loath or leaf is a wonderful old Middle English expression. Loath, of course, means... loath or leaf basically means whether you like it or not, right? Leaf is the old Anglo-Saxon word for love, and loath means hate. Okay, so, whether you love it or hate it, the situation is you're going to steal a gem, right? Are you going to steal Morgoth's gem, or are you going to steal Thingol's gem? Thou must here choose twixt love and oath. If vow to break is still thee loath, then Luthien must either die alone, or death with thee defy beside thee, marching on your fate that hidden before you lies in wait. You're either going to go to Morgoth or not. But if you choose not, right, Luthien's still going to be with you, right? Huan gets what Beren doesn't get. There is no other option, right? What Beren is choosing, he's basically trying to choose sort of none of the above in a sense, right? He doesn't want to steal Luthien. Because remember, that is a factor here. Her dad said, you can marry my daughter if you bring a Silmaril. And Beren seems to take that seriously, right? So Luthien saying, no, I don't want to go home, I want to stay with you. Beren does seem to feel, he does not want her to die. That's the number one thing. But I think the way that Huan here, what Huan touches on, I think is important. If they just hang out, What's to stop them staying here? They're together now, right? They're together now. They're away from Doriath. Well, you know, they could be like, hey, I hear Vinyamar's great these days, and it's pretty lonely out there. Let's go out, make a little house by the beach, retire. But to do that would be to be stealing Thingol's gem, right? Would be to leave his own vow unfulfilled. He's got to choose between his love and his oath. If he chooses his love rather than his oath, if he chooses to stay with Luthien, he's breaking his oath, and he's stealing Thingol's gem, not Morgoth. Or he's got to steal Morgoth's gem. So the only thing that is not an option is stealing neither one of them, right? He can't say, I can't be with Luthien, because that wouldn't be right. It would be breaking my oath. But I'm not going to, I'm not going to Angband either, right? That's not an option. She's going to stay with him. Either she stays with him and they go to steal the jewel, or else she stays with him and they go somewhere else and he's stealing Thingol's jewel, right? Huan is pretty clear on the situation here. The two of you are bound together. Luthien must either die alone or death with thee defy beside thee, marching on your fate that hidden before you lies in wait. Notice a grammatical point here. I'm here remembering that wonderful paper that the recent graduate of our graduate program, Sparrow Alden, gave at Mythmoot the year before last, about the Athrobeth. Notice how Huan shifts his pronouns. One fair gem, thou must be thief, thou must here choose. If vow to break is still thee loath, right? Or death with thee defy. And then he shifts, marching on your fate that hidden before you lies in wait. That is not an accident. That is a deliberate shift. Thee is a singular, second person singular. You is second person plural. He, Huan, is addressing Beren at first. Of one fair gem, you, Beren, thou must be, if vow to break is still thee loath, talking about Beren's choices, right? Or death with thee, she's going to defy death with thee, beside thee, marching on your fate together, the two of your fate, that hidden before the two of you lies in wait, right? Huan gets it, right? You have a fate together. Your fate is bound together. In other words, it's not just that Huan gets something that Beren doesn't get. I think Huan gets something that Luthien doesn't get either, right? Remember, Luthien was all like, hey, Mr. Mortal, not dying is not so much fun for elves, actually, right? Don't forget, I'm going to be going back to Doriath and looking at the pitiless waters forever and ever, right? And what does Huan say? Actually, no, not necessarily true. Their fates are tied together. Huan perceives this. We've had no reference in the poem so far to Luthien sharing his fate of death, of her becoming mortal. It's not really been on the table. Not explicitly. Huan seems to be the one bringing this up. Just as he has two choices, either to steal one gem or the other, she has two choices. Death or death, right? Defying death beside thee, or dying alone. Not dying, not an option, Huan says. And I think, I think it's really interesting. I do think that this is something that we're seeing here for the first time. I mean, it's not been talked about here. And yeah, exactly. Oh, prophetic hound. Exactly, Tom. Exactly. He reveals something, I think, that neither one of them were really understanding. Beren has a choice of thefts. She has a choice of deaths. He cannot any longer preserve her from death. Remember, that's made more explicit in the published Silmarillion. What I was just quoting is from the published Silmarillion. Yeah. Yeah, good, Josiah, yes, good. There is that sort of glimpse forward. In his doom was Luthien snared, and deathless in his dying shared. Yeah. No, you're right. It's been alluded, it's been hinted at. But notice that's for our benefits. That's the narrator of the poem saying that. That's foreshadowing. We don't have any reason to believe, I think, that Beren or Luthien are thinking that way or understanding that. Sometimes, because the story of Luthien and Beren is so important, is so dominant in Tolkien's world, sometimes people, sort of Tolkien readers, will sometimes talk as if like it's an obvious given, like obviously if an elf and a man marry, then the elf is going to become mortal. Nobody knew that. I mean, that was not a thing, right? No reason to think that that's a thing. But anyway, it's this seems to be the moment, if anything, where they're coming to understand that. Again, this is to me what I think is so important about this whole section. There's a. I can understand. I could understand the impulse of any reader who, reading through this section, was sort of thinking like, "Man, this is kind of dragged out." Right? Like the stay behind. Oh no, I don't want to. No, you really should. Oh, but I can't. No, I don't want you to come into death with me. No, I will face death with you. It's like, okay, let's go along to the facing of death already. I can understand that. But I think this is such a crucial moment because both of them are really only now coming to understand exactly how strange is the adventure, on which they have begun here. They're only now really coming to understand their fate. And I think that is a crucial step prior to their going to Angband together. Okay. All right, I'm going to skip a passage that I was going to do. I'm just not going to have time. Let's jump ahead to let's move on to Angband. So the passage I wanted to do was the sort of dream that he has when he gets shot with the arrow, right? When he takes the arrow for her from Curufin, and then he's restored back. It's interesting about death and being called back from death. There's some more sort of foreshadowing here, but let's move on more quickly to the death. All right. Notice the imagery here. We'll be quick on the next two passages, just in case we weren't thinking about it. Again, this is some of the passages that I was thinking about when I said it's not just that he's facing uncounted odds of probable dying or probably being killed. He is going into death itself. Dorna Fauglith, land of thirst, they after named it, waste accursed, the raven-haunted, roofless grave of many fair and many brave. Thereon the stony slopes look forth from deadly nightshade falling north, from sombre pines with pinions vast, black-plumed and drear, as many a mast of sable-shrouded ships of death, slow wafted on a ghostly breath. Thence Beren grim now gazes out across the dunes in shifting drought, and sees afar the frowning towers of thunderous Thangorodrim lower, where thunderous Thangorodrim lowers. Okay, could the image be any more clear, right? He is standing on the slopes of deadly nightshade, which are black-plumed and drear like the masts of sable-shrouded ships of death. So it's like he is wafted onto the shore by the ships of death, and he's come to the place which is a raven-haunted, roofless grave, right? Like, okay, I'm tracking with you, right? We've got it now. This is not explicitly a descent into the underworld, but it's a lot like a descent into the underworld, right? It is the land of death itself into which Beren is going. We get this same thing emphasized when they actually enter Angband. This is in Canto 13. This is after they've passed Karkaroth. and are now descending down towards Morgoth, the beginning of Canto 13. Into the vast and echoing gloom, more dread than many-tunneled tomb in labyrinthine pyramid, where everlasting death is hid, down awful corridors that wind, down to a menace dark enshrined, down to the mountain's roots profound, devoured, tormented, bored, and ground by seething vermin spawned of stone, down to the depths they went alone. Man, just awesome. Kate, aren't the down, down, down lines really cool? I mean, that is pretty awesome. But again, the imagery is really clear, right? More dread than many tunneled tomb and labyrinthine pyramid where everlasting death is hid. It's Kate, and the way it ends on alone. Yeah, so cool, isn't it? So again, we're going down into the land of death. It's like he's going down to death itself. My point in bringing up these passages is not just to say, like, don't we see the way in which he's associating this with death, but to point to the over, especially in the context of what we've just seen, right? That is in the previous discussions about death and immortality. There is a sense, bear with me here, there is a sense in which this poem is moving in an almost allegorical direction. I know everyone objects whenever, Tolkien fans have heard Tolkien's words when Tolkien, in the preface to the second edition of The Fellowship of the Ring, urged people not to read allegories into his books. It hasn't stopped journalists, but by golly, Tolkien fans have taken that to heart. And there's almost always somebody who jumps down my throat if ever I suggest that Tolkien is doing something allegorical. He does use allegory. Sometimes he even confesses to using it on purpose, as in Smith of Wootton Major, for instance. And it's pretty obvious that he's using it in Leaf by Niggle as well. And even in moments when he's not just being purely allegorical, there's often a kind of an allegorical sort of underlayer implications to the story that he's telling. The way that Angband is associated with the lands of the dead, it gives this whole element of the story. First of all, it recalls explicitly the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. The story of Orpheus and Eurydice kind of looms, and the Middle English versions, or Orfeo, which Tolkien translated, that story kind of looms over the Beren and Luthien story anyway, right? I mean, especially with when later on, of course, in the Silmarillion version, when Luthien does her Orpheus impression, right, and goes to stands before Mandos and sings her song that causes, and it's the parallel with Orpheus is explicit, though gender reversed at that point. But you can even see it here, right? The way that the two of them are descending to the underworld. In which case, who's in the position of Eurydice? Right, Tom, and she doesn't blow it like Orpheus did. You're absolutely right. If they're descending into the underworld like Orpheus, Kate, the Silmarils are Eurydice, right? And that's really kind of interesting. But again, I can't get away from the fact. He's been saying, no, I don't want you to die. And she's like, no, I would rather die than live a life of immortality. And Huan's like, you're both wrong. She has already chosen death. Beren is going to choose to try to steal Morgoth's jewel rather than stealing Thingol's jewel. So he's also going to choose death. So the two of them are going to go, and they're going to face down death together and try to shake its towers and gates, right? That sounds like it is at least a sort of semi-allegorical foreshadowing of what is to come later on. I just, all of this language, I just can't avoid it. I can't get away from it in this part of the poem. Okay. So let's think. What about the end of the poem? Where was this poem headed? I ask this here because the end of the poem, the end of the story, the end of Beren and Luthien's story, ends up being about death and mortality. This was even true back in the Tale of Tinuvio in the Book of Lost Tales, back when the two of them were both elves, right? They were both elves. They both died and go over to Mandos, and they get released by Mandos, and it's not 100% obvious like why, but they're made mortal when they return. And again, that's not 100% obvious why they're made mortal exactly. But anyway, I mean, the question of like, their being together and mortality and immortality, it's a little confused and a little bit unclear at the end of the Tale of Tinuvio exactly sort of what's going on. But we're already going there. We're already raising those issues at the end of the Tale of Tinuvio. My argument here is that those issues are front and center in the Beren and Luthien story that we get in the Lay of Leithian. I mean, I think there's really just no question about that. And we see it from, as you were pointing out, Josiah, I think it was you that was pointing this out. Yes, we saw it foreshadowed back in Canto 4 when they got together, right? That's what we should expect, right? It is now what was a kind of odd afterthought. Afterthought is an awkward word to use, but anyway, what was a weird kind of epilogue? That's what I want to say. What was a sort of just a weird and kind of hard to understand or hard to explain epilogue of the Tale of Tinuvio in the Book of Lost Tales is now the thematic centerpiece of the entire story. And all of the release from bondage stuff, I think, that we're getting in this poem is meant to be building up to that. All of the number of times we see people getting released from bondage, different people in different ways, and that motif going on and building, I am 100% convinced that the release from death, that Mandos releasing Beren to Tinuvio at the end of the poem, is the big, the big culminating release from bondage that we were building up to the whole time. Except I'm not even really sure about that. That is, I think that's going to be the biggest literal release from bondage. All of the people who are kept in prison and set free one way or another. Certainly the setting free of Beren from Mandos is going to be the greatest and most culminating of those literal release from incarceration moments of the poem. And yet again, I think the whole question about release from bondage ultimately comes down to death and the question of mortality. What exactly is release from bondage? Is escape from death? I titled this class The Great Escape. Of course, the phrase that Tolkien uses to talk about the idea of the escape from death, or as perhaps the elves write their stories about, escape from deathlessness. This story is both, in a sense. Right? This story deals with both of those great escapes, the escape from death and the escape from deathlessness. I don't pretend to guess exactly where he was going to go at the end of the story, but these seem to be the things that stay. If we trace these themes and we see the way it's headed, this certainly seems to me to be what's going to be at issue there at the end, and where he's kind of going with this. This is where I, again, Beren's, the choice to make Beren immortal and Luthien an elf, that choice which has happened, which seems to have happened in the context of the poem, the Light as Leaf on Linden Tree poem that we saw embedded in the Way of the Children of Huan. That choice is the turning point of the whole thing, and where, again, that whole mortality thing that is the awkward epilogue on the Tale of Tinuvio becomes now the absolute centerpiece of the whole poem. I think this is awesome. The Lay of Leithian is a great story, and I love, in general, I love the poetry. I don't think this is the greatest poem he ever wrote. I mean, I think that there. I mean, I think that Light as Leaf on Linden Tree is a better poem, actually, as far as his actual sort of poetic usage. I mean, there are certainly passages and moments in this poem that I absolutely love. But to me, seeing Tolkien, I would have loved to see Tolkien's full-length poetic treatment of Luthien in Mandos and what happened after. That is on my really, really, really short list of stuff that Tolkien didn't finish that I really, really, really wish he had finished. Yes, the Tuor and the Fall of Gondolin, that's published in Unfinished Tales, that's very, very high on my list. The Fall of Arthur is very, very high on my list. It is for this reason that the Lay of Luthien is also very, very high on my list. Children of Huan, I'm interested in the Children of Huan. We're talking about the kind of fun things. In some ways, we also talked about the ways in which I almost find it a relief that the Children of Huan wasn't finished, because I would have hated to see that really fun and admirable Turin that we saw in the Lay of the Children of Huan come to the grief that we know lies before him in the rest of his story. So there is a part of me that is glad that the Way of the Children of Huan wasn't finished, but the Lay of Luthien, I would have loved to hear Luthien in Mandos when we got that, and see how all of this stuff, how all the release from bondage stuff really was going to be brought together at the end. I don't really know, but again, I'm pretty sure that that's where, sort of thematically, that's where all signs point anyway, that's where things were going to go. Let me touch on a few other issues before we... Okay. All right. Let's touch on a few other issues that I can't bear to leave behind, and we shouldn't leave behind entirely. One is Beren's farewell poem. This is a beautiful poem. Of course, one of those other moments is the second moment. The first was the combat between Felagund and Thu, where when writing the prose Silmarillion, Tolkien was just like, whatever, screw it, I'm just going to put the poetry in, right? So he goes and he quotes at length, just, segues into a direct quotation from the Lay of Luthien. The other moment is Beren's song, right? When Beren is doing his farewell, sweet earth and northern sky. Again, let's just put the verse straight into the prose Silmarillion, because that best captures what's going on here, and he doesn't seem to even want to do that in prose. So let's look at Beren's song. Farewell, now hear, ye leaves of trees, your music in the morning breeze. Farewell, now blade and bloom and grass that see the changing seasons pass. Ye waters murmuring over stone, and meres that silent stand alone. Farewell, now mountain, vale, and plain. Farewell, now wind and frost and rain, and mist and cloud and heaven's air. Ye star and moon so blinding fair, that still shall look down from the sky on the wide earth, though Beren die. Though Beren die not, and yet deep, deep whence comes of those that weep no dreadful echo, lie and choke in everlasting dark and smoke. That's really cheerful, right? So he's saying farewell to things, right? Goodbye, leaves. This is, it's probably unkind to compare this poem to Goodnight Moon, though I can't help but think of Goodnight Moon. Farewell, leaves. Farewell, mountain. Farewell, vale and plain. Farewell, waters murmuring over stone. But anyway, so he's saying farewell to everything. Farewell noises everywhere. Good night, Morgoth, exactly. I love his segue at the end. I mean, again, it's kind of awful in a way. Farewell, ye star and moon so blinding fair. Which ones? The ones that still shall look down from the sky on the wide earth, though Beren die. It's like Sam's recognition, except opposite, right? Sam, in dread of death and and under shadow, looks up and sees that there's still light and high beauty above the reach of the shadow, right? Beren looks up and says, I'm probably going to die, but the stars are still going to be shining down even after I'm dead, right? No problem, right? Actually, it's not the shadow that doesn't really matter, it's me that doesn't really matter, right? Though Beren die, you're going to keep shining down, or even if I don't die, even if I'm, for example, imprisoned somewhere deep, deep, where even the noises of my weeping, even the dreadful echoes of my weeping will not emerge to the surface. If I'm lying and choking in everlasting dark and smoke, you'll still be shining down. It'll all be good. Gets a little distracted there, sort of imagining his own torment, right? No matter, but I shouldn't make fun. No matter how bad it gets, right? No matter how dark and awful it gets, the stars are still gonna shine down. Karita says the moon doesn't care if Beren dies. Well, boy, Karita, thinking of that really puts Goodnight Moon in a totally different context, doesn't it? Anyway, never mind. Now, after saying farewell to things and recognizing, sort of the beauty of the world around him, which is not in fact dependent upon him, but is going to keep merrily going on and doing its seasonal changes and shining down on things even after he's dying, or even after he's being kept imprisoned and tortured for a very, very long time, deep, deep below the earth. Farewell. We've got another farewell. Farewell, sweet earth and northern sky, forever blessed, since here did lie, and here with lissom limbs did run, beneath the moon, beneath the sun, Luthien to Nuviel, more fair than mortal tongue can tell. Though all to ruin fell the world, and were dissolved and backward hurled, unmade into the old abyss, yet were its making good for this, the dawn, the dusk, the earth, the sea, that Luthien on a time should be. Exactly, Tom. The thing I think is awesome, but the reason I really wanted to make sure we talked about Beren's farewell poem here, is that I totally understand why Tolkien felt that he had to quote this poem in the prose Silmarillion. What I don't understand is why he chose only to quote half of it, right? I mean, maybe he didn't end up liking the Goodnight Moon part of the poem. I don't know if he just disliked that part and thought the second part was better, and it is kind of better. But the second half makes so much more sense after the first half. Exactly as Tom says. He's just said, I don't matter, right? The world is going to go on unchanged even if I die. But Luthien matters, right? I am merely a bit player on the stage of this world, and if I die, it will have no consequence. She justifies the existence of the entire world. His description couldn't be more opposite, right? The world shall roll along unnoticing if I die or am tormented for a long time deep, deep beneath the earth. Luthien is the culmination and purpose of the existence of all of these things, right? Even if, so he says, if I die, the light will still shine, right? Then he says, if the whole world collapses, if everything else dies, it will have been worth it. That Luthien on a time should be. That's again, the context in which the first half of the poem puts the second half of the poem is, I think, really, really important, and really changes our view of that. Anyway, I wanted to point out the two halves of the poem thing. There's a lot more that could be said about that, but I will leave that. I will leave that to you guys. Let's run on and look at a couple other things. One, I couldn't pass this is a total side note, but I couldn't pass this passage up. Not may the fragrance fair enclose the odor of immortal flowers in everlasting spring 'neath showers that glitter silver in the grass of Valinor. Where'er did pass to Nuviel, such air there went. From that foul devil-sharpened scent, its sudden sweetness, no disguise enchanted dark to cheat the eyes could keep, if near those nostrils drew, snuffling in doubt. Thus Beren knew, upon the brink of hell, prepared for battle and death. So they're meeting Karkaroth. And Beren has this moment where he's like, okay, we're disguised. And then he's like, oh, shoot. Karkaroth is going to be able to smell her. Right? Exactly, Brian. It smells like elves. That's what Karkaroth and Bilbo Baggins have in common, is they both smell the fragrant... They both go, smells like elves. Right? Remember, this poem, in particular, this part of this poem. Remember when this poem was written? This part of the poem? 1931. He's already writing The Hobbit now. In fact, the dates are a little uncertain, but he may even have already written the sentence in Chapter 3 of The Hobbit, where Bilbo says, it smells like elves. Right? When he writes this. Right? So, you have to think of The Hobbit when you think of the Tale of Tinuviel, because it's the next thing in Tolkien's writing. Here they're even overlapping, right? So that line, which always strikes people as so funny when Bilbo says, it smells like elves. It's like Luthien. This is the description of Luthien's body odor, okay? The odor of immortal flowers in everlasting spring, 'neath showers that glitter silver in the grass in Valinor. That's what Luthien's body odor is like. She always smells like that. This odor is around her all the time. And here's Beren thinking, oh man, the wolf is so going to smell that. She doesn't smell like a vampire at all, right? Yeah, exactly. Wind smelling sweet, fragrant, and like immortal flowers is not necessarily a bad thing. When the incredible deliciousness of your body odor gives away your disguise as a vampire bat, it's like, hashtag elf princess problems. But anyway, this is the passage. When I'm like talking about my book to like middle schoolers, this isn't the answer that I give. But if Tolkien fans ask me, why on earth does Bilbo say it smells like elves? What do elves smell like? This is the passage I go to. To me, this is the answer to that question. Especially with a chronology, it's just, to me, it's obvious. This is what Bilbo was smelling. So I couldn't pass that up because, it's really important. Notice even Karkaroth, I don't want to miss Karkaroth entirely. Notice what happens here. Her cloak by white hands woven, like a smoke, like all bewildering, all enthralling, all enfolding, evening falling, from lifted arms as forth she stepped, across those awful eyes she swept, a shadow and a mist of dreams, wherein entangled starlight gleams. Sleep, O unhappy, tortured thrall, thou woe-begotten, fail and fall, down, down from anguish, hatred, pain, from lust, from hunger, bond and chain, to that oblivion dark and deep, the well, the lightless pit of sleep. For one brief hour escape the net, the dreadful doom of life forget. Even Karkaroth is being released from bondage. Right? The bondage of consciousness. Remember, he is unsleeping. He seems to have been cursed with the inability to sleep in order to make him a more effective watchdog. Right? The creatures of Thu, as the creatures of Angband, are tortured and tormented by what Morgoth has done to them. When she puts Karkaroth to sleep, she explicitly is releasing him. Sleep, O unhappy, tortured thrall. You poor, miserable, unfortunate slave. And she grants him sleep, thereby, of course, saving their lives and enabling them to enter. But again, I think it's this is her context thing, and I come back. This is even more strong, more clear than her pity towards Thu was. But it seems to me of a similar kind. So again, even here we see. Notice that we see not only the release from bondage as this continuous motif, but Luthien being the releaser from bondage, right? The one who brings release from bondage, and her song, right? Yeah, pity does rule the fate of many, it seems, Tom. And Tom, you're absolutely right. Of course, your implication here is, of course, very right. Notice the parallels, right? The parallel between Frodo's bitten off finger and Beren's bitten off fist is pretty clear, right? Even Sam sees the parallel. I mean, that is, I mean, I'm thinking of Sam's line when he says, I'd have given him a whole hand of mine, rather. He would rather have been, Sam the one-handed. Anyway, see, he's Sam is Luthien when he's setting Frodo free from the tower. He would be in Beren's position. Anyway, so okay. So yeah, the parallel between, notice how she has pity on Karkaroth here, and then Karkaroth seems to return the pity by biting off Beren's hand, which seems like it's a bad thing. The Gollum parallel with the pity on Gollum, and then he comes back and bites off Frodo's finger, which seems like a bad thing. What exactly would he have done with the death of Karkaroth? Exactly, because of course it's Karkaroth that is eventually going to bring Beren to death and bring about the ultimate release from bondage of the two of them, through the two of them. Anyway, so tantalizing to see where that would have gone. Notice even the Balrogs get set free. That is, they also go into sleep. But notice who also is finally being released from bondage. The Silmarils, right? Our Eurydice, and o'er the host of hell there shone with a cold radiance clear and wan the Silmarils, the gems of fate, imprisoned in the crown of hate. They're imprisoned, right? They need to be set free. Yeah. So again, we can see that coming in, and again, how that was going to come in with this, imagining, seeing the way in which this is all being tied together with Karkaroth and with the Silmaril and Beren's hand and the Silmaril that's gonna be bound around Luthien's throat. Would even have gone that far? Would this poem have gone all the way up to their deaths, their second deaths, right? When she has the Silmaril, and I wonder. I don't know. I mean, it's and you might be thinking, why am I saying I don't know where this story was going to go and what he was going to do? We have the published Silmarillion, right? So we know where he was going to go. No, we know where he eventually went. That's not the same thing, right? It's not the same thing as saying where the momentum of this poem was taking him. What ending he had in his mind, where he would have been taken by this poem that he was writing, had he gotten to the end of it. I think what he put down in prose as the end of the story much later is not a substitute for where this poem would have taken him had he completed it. Okay, I'm going to keep going. I have 3 more slides that I want to do. 3 more passages. I want to talk about the confrontation with Morgoth. Maybe I should stop. Come to think of it, we could put off next time. That's not so bad. We could start off with the confrontation with Morgoth, then go. Yeah, okay. Let's do that. Okay. So next time, we will look at the confrontation with Morgoth in Canto 13. I have 2 questions that I want to ask about that. Question number 1. Why do we start the canto with the fall of Fingolfin? Why do we go there? Okay? Why do we get the entire story of the duel between Morgoth and Fingolfin? It's not like it's completely irrelevant, but though I love the fact that, when they're getting their Baroness to walk around the pits in the ground from where Gron smashed down, right? He's like, it's hard to approach the gates because the terrain is really irregular now, thanks to that. I really love that reference. Why? How does it fit? What does it have to do with the story of Beren and Luthien? I don't believe that it's just a diversion. I don't think he's merely digressing. why do we get that? How does that connect with the story of Beren and Luthien and their confrontation with Morgoth? How does it prepare us for Luthien and Morgoth later? Second question. What's Morgoth's plan with Luthien? He has that long, disturbing speech to Luthien. What does he want exactly? What does that speech show us about him? Remember, like, the vow that Thu was trying to get them to swear? We talked about this. We spent a long time looking at this in the last class and thinking about sort of the theology underlying, like orcs loving hatred. Remember all that stuff we were talking about? What does Morgoth's statement to Luthien tell us about him? What motivates Morgoth? What's in Morgoth's mind? What are his desires? That's the other question I want to come to. So, then we're going to finish up by looking at I read C.S. Lewis's commentary because it's really fun. I don't know how long we're going to spend talking about C.S. Lewis's commentary, but if there's any questions that you have or things that you notice about the commentary, email me. I would be happy to come back and look at any passages from Lewis's commentary that you're particularly interested to talk about. So please do let me know there. Otherwise, I'm probably not going to spend an enormous amount of time on it, but we'll mention it a little bit. Then we'll come back and look somewhat briefly. I'm not going to look at great length, but I want to look at the Lay of Leithian Recommenced. And my main purpose there, the main question I will have about the recommencement of the Lay of Leithian is just, where does he seem to be taking the poem? What's the when he does come back to it, can we see sort of different directions in which this new poem seems to be going? What seem to be the fundamental differences between the poem as we see it recommenced and the earlier poems? So those are the things we'll be looking at next time. I am very confident that we will get through all of them and be finished, and then we will be moving on to Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell thereafter. So thank you very much, everybody, and I will wish you all a good night, and we'll see you guys next week when we will absolutely, unquestionably finish the Lays of Beleriand. Thanks very much, everybody. Good night.